So we're going to talk about childhood masturbation.
Okay.
I think it's really interesting, one, that like clearly we had to start at some time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fascinating because people don't talk about like children's sexuality, right? It's like really taboo to talk about like kids with sexualities, but we were all kids with sexualities and we were all kids who thought about sex. And I know personally, I started masturbating at a very young age. I was like very aware of my penis.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I was like, oh, this thing is supposed to bring me pleasure. And from a very early age, I was like trying to figure it out. I was like, how am I going to like experience this thing that everyone keeps talking about? And I would like do different things. I would like slap it around. I would rub it. Like, you know, I just didn't, like no one like told me how to do it.
Yeah.
So I like tried a whole bunch of different things.
Most kids want to get information from their parents. They want to hear it from their parents. It's a trusted source. You know, and there's a lot of misinformation that kids can get from their parents. There was one woman I spoke to who said that when she was young, her mom told her that she could get pregnant from kissing a boy. And it was after that point that she had a hard time kissing her own father or her brothers. But that incorrect information had an unintended consequence of affecting her relationship with her father and her brothers after that. And so we have this misinformation that comes out, and we think we're protecting innocence, and we think we're protecting the child, but giving them misinformation really isn't protecting them from anything.
Many children play sexual games with each other, but they're really afraid of doing it in a place where the parents would be able to see them. So rather they lock the door, hide themselves. But the sexual pleasure, the thing that people that they want to learn and play with each other is there already from birth. But the system is like pushing it away, and parents are making people afraid. So you have no chance to explore yourself or get to know yourself.
You can like see it in a moral way, and like you are a parents that are afraid of your child seeing you having sex, and you have sex one day and you think the child is sleeping and the child is waking up, opening the door to the room, and how you react is like and dragging the pillow, like shit, go out. And then the next day you bring your child to the zoo, showing animals in cages in a totally normal way. What kind of moral do we want for our children? How do we want our children to see love, or what's natural or not, when we react so hard on things that is no problem, but still want to educate our children to have greed and competition and control over nature and all this, like the moral structure of our society is totally upside down in my view.
Thinking about masturbation and the impact or the effects that it has on children as they age, it depends on how the parent reacts when they see their child masturbating or when they catch their child masturbating. Most of the time, there will be people who will, slap a hand or, shame the child. Don't do that. It's not appropriate. And the interesting thing is, a lot of times it happens more to girls than it does to boys. Parents will kind of look the other way or think, oh, boys will be boys when boys masturbate, but redirect a girl or shame them.
Well, very little children, anybody knows, you have to teach them not to masturbate in the living room. They will discover their bodies. And we all were taught not to masturbate in the living room. In more modern houses, we try to teach kids with love that big people do it in their bedrooms. And that's fine. I mean, that's not going to harm anybody. But most of us of any age were taught that masturbation was embarrassing and shameful and dreadful, and we were taught that when we were too young to remember.
remember the first time where I figured it out, and like I had my I felt this like caught the motion somehow, and I realized that motion was like doing something to my, I know, it was doing something to my body, and I felt something arising from within, and like at first I was like really scared, so I stopped, and I was like, whoa, what was that feeling? And then like a couple of days later I went back to it, and like the first time I ever like ejaculated, my mind was blown. I was like, what the, like no one told me this was gonna happen. Like they told me that it was gonna feel good, but they didn't tell me this whole other component was, I was like, what do I do with this? Like,
oh,
it was just like, and so.
From the first time I masturbated, it was very much tied to me being queer, and it was like about a boy and about a certain feeling that I had an understanding was like not okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that there was like initially like a lot more shame than I would like to admit tied to that. And like I just remembered like the initial emotion being like less excitement and being more like impending disaster is here. Like what is happening? Oh my God, what have I done? Like I wouldn't even say, I don't think I could quite tie it to guilt. It was just more like fear, I think. It certainly didn't stop me, let me tell you.
The questions that come up when you're a child that parents usually try and stop children from asking, I was never stopped, so I was always told immediately what functionality each piece of anatomy was for and why men were different to women. And, like I was actually told, like, you really should be masturbating around now, kind of thing. It's like, Mom, God, leave me alone. Whereas I think a lot of people get the opposite. And particularly with children, I think people are really afraid of children's sexuality because there's such a huge obvious, like, reasonable stigma against, like, pedophiles, right? People who sexually engage with children, right? That's horrific. But children often engage with each other, like, sticking pencils up each other's bottoms in kindergarten or whatever. And then if they're yelled at or screamed at, then they're told, then that's kind of embedded in them that that's wrong. So I think if you catch your 3-year-old sticking his pencil up someone else's bottom, I think I think it should just be around hygiene mainly. Just make sure they take care of themselves. Like, okay, this isn't clean. You shouldn't be doing this. But not in the same way that licking the toilet isn't clean. It's like it's just a natural thing. You should be taking care of your body. Your body is a temple. So just whatever you're going to do, just make sure that you do it safely. I guess would be the same advice as I would give an adult.
Yo creo que son como las tecnologías del sistema para reprimirte y para hacer que tú tengas una sexualidad menos plena. Espero que la mayoría de la gente se haya masturbado desde bien pequeño. Y no sé, yo al menos con mis amigas sí tenía juegos sexuales a los 8 años y de hecho es que yo tuve bastante suerte a nivel familiar, pero mi madre a mí me ha contado que yo jugaba con mi hermano a hacer el amor cuando teníamos 4 años, o sea, como que creo que los niños juegan bastante a esto. Luego cuando ya se dan cuenta que son reprimidos, lo ocultan, pero lo hacen igual. Yo veo que estas cuestiones son dispositivos culturales para que luego la sexualidad sea una cuestión que tampoco se hable, porque tampoco se habla mucho. O sea, la gente habla de sexualidad, la gente normal, quiero decir normal de manera casi despectiva, la gente normal habla de sexualidad siempre como dentro de unos parámetros muy establecidos. Las tías hablan de los tíos de tal forma, los tíos hablan de las tías. Entonces creo que el trabajo que se hace con los niños es como para comenzar eso.
I think there are quite a few reasons why there are taboos or difficult feelings about children masturbating. One of them is that we have this idea that childhood is supposed to be a time of innocence and that sexuality taints or destroys innocence. The first piece of that is interesting, given that left to their own devices, many children will start touching their genitals because they like to experience pleasure. So this idea that children wouldn't masturbate because they're innocent is just plain out wrong. But it also rests on this idea that sexuality destroys innocence, as if sex is somehow something dangerous or sinful. And while there are many cultures and religions that will argue that, I personally don't think that there has to be anything about sexuality that damages innocence one way or the other. Even more deeply, one of the reasons why there are taboos around children masturbating is because so many adults were shamed for masturbating when they were children. And one of the patterns that we often see is that if I grew up being shamed for masturbating and being told that it's sinful and being told that it's wrong, and then I have a child and I discover my child masturbating, I'm in a very tricky spot. Either I have to work through all of my old emotions and heal them and recover from them and take responsibility for them, or I need to pass that shame on to my child. Because otherwise I need to explain to myself why I had this experience and why there was something bad about that. So oftentimes we pass these shames on from one generation to the next because it's easier than healing from them ourselves.
I belong to the Holy One. Lay it on me, it could have been you. It's been a long cold winter, have you lost your dance shoes? Dance, 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 naked under the tree. Dance, dance, dance.